Today I'm going to teach you a basic formula that we use for paragraph structure. For starters, I want you to use this formula when constructing your paragraphs until you get a hang of it. And then we'll look at tweaking these paragraphs to make them work for us later as this is an honors class. But for now, if you stick to the basic formula, you should do well with your writing. And you can see we call this structure MELEC. I know some of you have probably already been introduced to this in your social studies classes. Each letter for MELEC stands for something. As to the M is a main point. Every paragraph must have a main point, and your paragraph needs to have something that's about. The E stands for explanation. L is a link to the text, and C is a concluding sentence. We're now going to break down each part of the MELEC structure so you can really see what is expected of you in your writing. The first part of MELEC, and the first part of your paragraph, is the M, main point. Right, there are 3 C's of main point writing. Your main point should be clear. It should be very apparent to your reader what exactly your paragraph is about. It should also be concise. You want to avoid wordiness in the main point. You want to give your reader the exact idea of what you're writing about. Alright, it's better to say, be careful what you wish for, rather than say, the theme is, be careful what you wish for. Okay. Less words, the better. You also want your main point to be strong as concrete. I know that one doesn't necessarily start with C, so you have to bear with me. But that means you have a good specific word choice. You really want your main point to stand out because it's the first thing your reader is going to read, and you want your reader to keep reading. Okay. So, as an example of what I mean by a good main point, if we take it from the monkey's paw, we can say, W. Jacobs uses Mr. White to prove the consequences of greediness. It's specific, it's clear, it's concise. It tells my reader exactly what my paragraph is about. You can see that my paragraph is going to be about how the author uses Mr. White to prove his theme. Once I have my main point, I move on to my explanation. Explanations are the meat and potatoes of the paragraph. It is where all of your ideas come through. Anything in explanation is directly from you, from your mind. My first E should always give the how. Keep in mind I want everything in my paragraph to work for me. So, as a guiding question for that, what I mean by the how, you see it says, how does the link prove the main point? Or how is the author using whatever literary term you are analyzing? But there should definitely be a how. How is this important? That's your first E. So not only are you expanding on your main point idea, but you're also explaining how it is important. The second E, the one that follows the link, always should give a why statement. And why does the link prove the main point? That's what you're looking at. So if you don't have that why statement, because statement, after your link in your second E, you've not written a good paragraph because you've not explained how you've gotten your ideas or why you've gotten your ideas to your reader. Your explanations should be about 2 to 3 sentences each. So as a brief example of what an explanation actually looks like, you can see, okay, so White's name, a symbol of purity, contradicts who he is as a person. Mr. White tends to let his curiosity control his decisions. Okay, so this is an example of a first E. It tells me how, right? It tells me how the author is using a symbol. It tells me how Mr. White tends to act. And now I've set myself up nicely for my link. So my next part is, once I have my first E, I need to link to an example. Okay? The example should come directly from the text. You can see that can either be a direct quote or a really strong paraphrase. The example I have for you is a direct quote. Once I finish my first E, I would say, White, with a slight cry, stooped down and snatched it off. Now I want you to notice a couple of things with the way I've done this direct quote. At the end, you'll see a parentheses, the author's last name, and then the number. I have some tips for you when you're dealing with citation. Some citation notes. After every link, you need to cite the link with the parentheses containing the author's last name and the page number. So even if you have a paraphrase as your link, it still needs to be cited. You have to let your reader know where you got your information. And we've been saying in discussions that every idea you have must be supported by the text. And this lets your reader know that your ideas are supported, in fact valid, because you have textual proof, you have textual evidence. If you're reciting the same source without switching to a different source, so you've already cited the story once, and that within that same paragraph, or within that same essay, you're reciting that story, but you haven't introduced any new sources yet, then you only need the page number. If you cited the story, but you cited a different source before going back to the story, then you'll need to re-put the author's name with the page number. And then notice, when I did have that citation, the end punctuation is placed after the parentheses, not inside the quotation mark. Okay, let's go back. We can see that. Alright. You can see that I have the period here after my parentheses. And I don't have any punctuation inside my quotation marks here at the end of the direct quote. And that's very important that you follow this format when you're citing. So that last part that we're going to talk about is C, the concluding sentence. Okay, you really want to tie the ideas up in a paragraph by connecting back to the main point, if that is the only paragraph or the last paragraph. If this having another paragraph to follow, you want your concluding sentence to kind of set up the transition into your next paragraph. And we'll look at that as we continue to look at writing and formatting essays. But you really want there to be a definite conclusion to the ideas in your paragraph. I like to tell people to just think of the concluding sentence as the bow that you've wrapped up on the package. Okay. So imagine at the end of my paragraph I say, Mr. White only learned his lesson as he was left with a horrible marriage and no son. Okay, pretty conclusive. I can throw it at the end of my paragraph. And actually what you'll see when I put it all together is my paragraph. W. Jacobs uses Mr. White to prove the consequences of greediness. Mr. White's name, a symbol of purity, contradicts who he is as a person. Mr. White tends to let his curiosity control decisions. White, with a slight cry, stooped out and snatched it off. White's grabbing at the paw from the fireplace demonstrates his greedy behavior. Mr. White seized the paw, giving him power to wish changes for his life. He only learned his lesson when left with a horrible marriage and no son. So there you have the basic MELEC paragraph. All the parts are together. You can see my main point. You can see my first E, which introduces my link. You can see that I have a why statement for my second explanation. I have that why. It's important. And why it's showing its greediness. And I have there as my concluding statement a little bit of the consequences as well. Right? He's left with a horrible marriage and no son. As the consequences of his greediness. And so you can see it all there wrapped up in a nice little paragraph. Now, Most of your assignments in this class will actually be MELEC, which is one step up from the MELEC. So using MELEC, you'll notice there's just an extra link and an extra explanation. However, that second E now has two roles. You still need to give the why of the first link, but you also need to transition to the how of the second link. So that second E is now playing double duty in the MELEC paragraph. If you have any questions, please write them down now so I can address them in class before you start writing your first paragraph assignment.